If you've read the video title and seen the thumbnail, you already know what I'm going to talk about in this video. Mortal Kombat X used to be a different game, and I mean really different. MKX in its infant stages was not the game we're familiar with in 2019. It's not like now, where some of the mix-ups are a little bit easier to react to, armored launchers for the most part are gone, and we have way more characters to juggle matchups with. Back in 2015, when this game just hit the stores, there were so many mechanical differences, system changes, and straight up crazy character options. For this installment of the Science of MKX, I've reset my version of Mortal Kombat to its minus day 1 patch. This was before the game obtained the day 1 patch, which fixed some things, ironed out some of the bugs, and made some other adjustments before we, the players, got our hands on the game to grind with. For this to be possible, it must be a vanilla copy of Mortal Kombat X. None of this XL malarkey, because that game comes with a patch a little bit later down the line that's already built in. We're taking the game fresh off the press. No internet connection during its installation either, because we wanted the game as it first existed. For this video, we cover some of the craziness of vanilla Mortal Kombat X, and in other cases, things that existed a few patches in too, but as they were discovered later down the line, of which they would be fixed, they are all intact and existing fully in this version of the game too. Of course, it's vanilla, so there's no DLC whatsoever, just the base roster. Strap yourselves in, it's going to get a little bit crazy. Let's start with some mechanics. First of all, you were able to use an interactable even while in block stun, granting the defender either an escape option if it was an evade, or a free hit if it was one of the grabs, for example. This was pretty crazy and it wouldn't last long, but it was there, so it's got to be covered. Stamina is up next. Run cancels ran rampant when MKX was new because the stamina was far more generous. In the final stages of the game, stamina would be taken away if you got hit during the run. The act of a run cancel would cost more initial stamina to execute as well, but originally, stamina was way more spend happy. Activating run cancels would be lighter on the stamina bar, so you could do more of them. We'll get into this a little bit more later. Breakers were also a lot more oppressive. When you broke a combo, you would lose both bars of stamina, as always has been that way. But the opponent would retain the stamina that they had at the time. This was especially tricky in the corner, where breaking a corner combo left you at the mercy of the opponent, who can now get in with the stamina that they have left, leaving you with no resources to defend yourself afterwards. In the move list, variation-specific moves were only found in the regular categories. The variation menu didn't even exist and would be added in the day 1 patch. These kind of changes back in the day, I'm sure, give you a bit of an example of how things just weren't the same. But mechanics were one thing. Over the course of time, there turned out to be a lot of character differences that were out of this world. Some were fixed in the day 1 patch, others found later in the pipeline. Here are a huge chunk of the character differences that ranged from strong tools to absolutely broken, or in some cases, not good at all. Sub-Zero feels fitting to start this with, and let's get the bad out of the way first. Unbreakable Sub-Zero was one of the worst NRS characters to date. He only had 2 moves, Barrier of Frost and Parry. Barrier of Frost functioned in a similar way as a form of reducing chip damage, but it had no way of linking into the other moves on hit like it does now, so your combo potential was basically non-existent. You may be wondering where the Shatter is too, and at this time, he didn't have that move in this variation, limiting his options on block as well. Meter Burn Slide, when in the aura, also didn't stun like it does now either. All in all, an utterly useless variation. Whilst Cryomancer did a lot of damage from his forward 4-2 1+3 string day 1, he couldn't special cancel this at all. The combo would always end here, once again leaving this variation with limited combo possibilities compared to what it became thanks to changes the string would receive down the line. Grandmaster, on the other hand, had one vital change that would be altered before long. Back in this version, the Ice Clone did not disappear on block. You can already guess how dangerous this would be. You would be correct. Grandmaster was already a nightmare in the corner, but with this, oh my lord. Liu Kang had a block infinite which combined the meter burn flying kick ender and his forward 2-1-3 run cancel. both extremely plus on block and jailed into another forward 2. Because the run cancel mechanic was more generous in this version of the game, Liu Kang could rep forward 2-1-3 enough times that he would regenerate his stamina during the bicycle kick extension to straight kick. Just keep an eye on your stamina and you get the muscle memory down to constantly build meter for more. The only way out of this was to take the final hit of forward 2-1-3 and be knocked to safety. This would be removed fast, but clearly Liu Kang's run cancels even to this day are lethal in the right hands. People often talk about how crazy Erron Black was back in the day. He's certainly a shadow of his former self now, but let's go over what made this character outrageous. Tick throws. This character could tick off so many buttons it was insane. Most prominently, 3 separate parts of his main string, 2-1-1-2-2. The guessing game was never ending, and that's even without discussing the speed of his forward 1 overhead. Completely unreactable back then, as you can see, giving him a dangerous and true 50-50 at all times.
Happiness is a warm gun.
His command grab was plus 20 on hit. It meant that after every combo, he could end in this and be right in your face for another turn, or if he successfully tick grabs, once again, he's in your face for another turn. Combine his 50-50s with his tick grabs and plus frames, and he was a non-stop mix-up machine. But how did he get in? In the minus day 1 patch version of this game, meter burn slide was still full screen, but it was only minus 5 on block, aka completely safe. A free way in that you had to respect. Pre-day 1 Erron Black was a monster, especially Outlaw, because he had all of this and a full combo armored launcher for icing on the cake.
Gun is the best defense.
Jackie Briggs had an infinite with the shotgun variation. Straight shot could be linked into her 1-1 string endlessly in the corner. This one is simple, broken, and would be fixed in the day 1 patch. Thank God. Believe it or not, Kung Lao was actually garbage day 1. He was covered in gaps that were eventually removed, and had such little combo potential to what he has now. It's unreal. He had some wild differences though, and here they are. Buzzsaw was the only remotely usable variation, but it was far more limited than it is now too. His enhanced low hat was plus 5 on block, but that didn't mean as much as other plus frames that other characters had. But it gave him the most solid neutral and mix-up potential. Issue is, even Buzzsaw wasn't that great, which leads me to Tempest. For some reason, Tempest Lao's enhanced spin started up in 4 frames, making it the fastest attack in the entire game, but that came with a heavy cost. As Orbiting Hat, his most important move, was useless across the board. It was impossible to link off this move during combos, even the enhanced version. It sent the opponent too far away during juggles, and was minus 13 on block in both versions. In this version of the game, Lao had one variation only, and even that wasn't great. Kung Jin was one of the absolute strongest characters in the game at this point because of one variation alone, BoJitsu. Even after the day 1 patch, this variation would dominate for many of these reasons, making him a launch period machine. BoJitsu was insane buttons, massive and very easy to obtain damage, and safety. Let me explain. BoJitsu had less damage scaling back then. Every realistic touch from either an unreactable overhead, low, or regular string could be confirmed into a full combo and ended in bow swing, which added up at the end. This meant that every touch, and I mean every touch, you were looking at roughly 40% damage or more. Neutral jump punch was obscenely good, amazing range, and excellent on block. You had to respect it, or eat a full combo with the crazy damage that we just mentioned. Forward 3, the 2-hitting string that ended in overhead, was 0 on block, and the BoJitsu full combo low launcher to make this a true 50-50 was only minus 9 on block, making it really difficult to punish and a true mix-up. And finally, enhanced bow swing. Oh my goodness, this move led to crazy damage, easy to use in a hit confirm, and was fully armored, making it one of the absolute greatest armored moves MKX has ever seen. All 3 variations of Quan Chi day 1 were crap. First of all, the ability to properly combo off of 2-1-1 2+4 wasn't in the game yet. You could maybe squeeze in a down 1 in the corner, but that's it. 2-2 meter burn also didn't exist. This was just a way to swap sides, and it didn't lead to any sort of combo damage either. These two alone made Kenjutsu not worth it at all, and limited Balanced massively. The issue with Balanced is that while it was arguably the most viable of the three, everything was minus and unsafe on block. The enhanced specials were simply less minus, but still not good at all. Possessed was forgettable for the same reasons. He couldn't perform an actual jump in off his teleport in this version either, which limited him once more. This character was an unsafe keep away only character, who lost bad to extreme run cancels, crazy good armor, and other rushdown tools while he was ill-equipped to deal with it. One of the more infamous bottom tiers day 1 for sure. He just didn't fit that version of the game whatsoever. Kitana had a pretty weak down 1 day 1. They would buff her to place a fan in her hands, giving her a bit more range, and this helped her mid-screen combos significantly. The most notable thing about absolute day 1 Kitana was that Mournful had a corner infinite. Her glaive would, for some reason, connect with an instant jump too if you timed it right, which led to an endless loop of the same thing over and over and over. It was particularly easy with larger characters because of their height, and it led to Mournful Kitana being banned until the infinite was fixed. Speaking of which, Ermac was another one of the characters to join the ban club. Mostly for Spectral, but honestly, this character was mechanically busted in all 3 variations. If Master of Souls connected an enhanced Soul Ball, the opponent would lose a bit of meter during the stun. That's fine, but if the opponent is stunned by regular Soul Ball and you end the combo in the enhanced version, the opponent's meter would drain constantly until you hit them again. Mystic Ermac drains the opponent's meter with enhanced choke. This too had a bug behind it, where if he traded right as the meter drain applied, the opponent's meter would drain constantly once more, only this time at a much faster rate. This had an extra bug possible where Ermac would regenerate health at the same speed, but it's much harder to replicate. You think that's where the brokenness ends though? Definitely not. Spectral took the cake here. If Ermac was mid-hover and executed a teleport, Ermac would be instantly given 1 bar of meter. This would always apply and would work by itself. In combos, it doesn't matter. 1 bar of meter on tap led to Spectral to be banned until this was fixed. Outside of that, Spectral was actually not good at all. The input for float used to be down, down, up, making it incredibly difficult to execute after his individual buttons, such as overhead forward 4 or low back 3. During the float itself, only single hitting buttons were possible. The ability to cancel into multiple buttons for combos in the float didn't exist until later, so Spectral was a lot of work for absolutely no reward. Minus day 1, Scorpion had one of the best armoured moves. His enhanced teleport was fully armoured, giving him an armoured launcher in all variations. It would be changed to be wake up only in the day 1 patch, but during this time it was crazy good. Hellfire stole the show though. Run cancels being as dangerous as they were meant that Hellfire aura after combos and constant 2-1-4 run cancels meant that unless you took the final hit of 2-1-4, you were jailed into a ton of chip damage. The only issue here is that if the Scorpion player read that you would take the 4, they could just make the read and cancel into EX Spear, which would just catch you, put you right back into another full combo, and was safe on block, making the read risk-free. This was one of the most dangerous run cancel characters the game had ever seen. But speaking of run cancels, at this time, Raiden's only variation worth using was Thunder God. Displacer and Master of Storms didn't have the forward 1-2 back 2 string, which limited them way beyond anything worth going for when Thunder God existed in this state. Raiden's forward 1 was a 5-frame mid, by far the greatest mid in the entire game. Its speed, combo ability, and the fact it was a mid was bloated and way too strong, which leads me to what the run cancels did for Raiden on top of all this. Raiden's run cancel combos were the exact same, but his shocker was, for some reason, unscaled at pretty much all points of a combo. End a combo in this, and it did massive damage, making his damage out of this world. 50% mid-screen for 1 bar? No problem. 55% in the corner? No problem. His corner 50-50 did crushing damage because of this too. His low, which usually scaled significantly, did over 40% with a bar for this reason. Oh yeah, and for some reason, when you did back 1-4 Shocker, it did way more damage if they were lowered to the ground. Cool! Finally, Raiden had an option select, where if you timed back 2 and Shocker at the perfect time, Shocker would come out on block, and a raw back 2 would come out on hit. This meant that Raiden could do the back 2 with no risk, as Shocker was -6 on block. Raiden's absurd damage, combined with this option select, meant that Thunder God was one of the most devastating characters in the entire game. Mileena did not have a good time back then. She was hilariously unsafe, even though she still did big damage. A big thing about her was that her back 1-2 in piercing, one of her most dangerous strings in the later stages, was awful on block. Back 1 was -15, back 1-2 was -19. The string even had a gap in the middle of it. Her telekick was unsafe on hit to extremely fast specials like Reptile Dash. She was a massive gamble character who, against other characters, just had a miserable experience. She would be buffed later, of course. Takeda was covered in gaps. All of his main strings had gaps in them before you could even cancel into kunai. Forward 1-2 +4, forward 1-2, 2 +4, back 3 into kunai, back 2-1 into kunai, the 2 +4 itself. There were so little ways he could safely use his buttons that he struggled greatly against characters with dangerous armored reversals. Lasher didn't have the jump normals. Those would be added later down the line. But that's not what upset me about this version. For this, I'm looking at Ronin. He didn't even have the quick call in this version of the game. Only blade call. You can already understand, I'm sure, that this meant his pressure game as we know it just didn't exist with Ronin. What a hindrance. Thankfully, this would be added sharpish. All I can really say about Shinnok is that he was seemingly an unfinished character on launch. His moveset wasn't complete at the time. On launch, Shinnok didn't have his overhead launcher at all. His back 3 was his low kick instead. This automatically meant that he didn't have the mix-up potential he would later have as they patched it in. Hellsparks could not be meter burned on block. His pressure came from Amulet Strike instead, which was obviously one hit instead of more. Shinnok was more unsafe automatically because of this. The one thing he did have was that he stole some pretty insane moves. Back then, when he was against Jax, he actually stole the unblockable ground pound. Unfortunately, yeah, you can see what's going on here. Poor guy can't get out. This was fixed very, very quickly, along with the rest of his moves being added. And finally, the man himself. My original main. There's a reason I saved Quan Chi for last. In the early stages of this game, Quan Chi was utterly ridiculous in both Summoner and Sorcerer. Many of the Sorcerer clips I'm about to show you were discovered months down the line, but as you'd expect, they are in this version as well, making Sorcerer quite possibly the most mechanically broken variation in this game. Summoner was the variation that you saw the most. In this build, Bat had no cooldown whatsoever. You could just machine gun this over and over again, giving Quan the best zoning in the game by a mile. That doesn't mean he didn't mix though, because this Bat was always available to set up impossible blocks all the time for no resources. There was a bug I found hidden away with the Bat though, and it was active for roughly 6 seconds. If you landed a trance and wanted to get rid of the Bat so you could refresh it for more time, it would disappear immediately and be locked away for 6 seconds instead. This was fixed when NRS added the cooldown to the Bat summon. But Sorcerer, oh boy, my holy grail, the variation I spent well over a year breaking to its core. Let me show you some stuff. Rune Trap we've all seen before. Set up the final hex after trance and jail chip damage until death using meter burn rune and 1-4. That is child's play compared to what lurked beneath. Did you know that Quan had the ability to manually recharge his armor by exiting and re-entering the armor spell? It was great full screen, but I discovered that if Quan Chi just stands on the edge of the spell and stance changed, the animation would place Quan outside and immediately back in again, giving you armor at the press of a button. Busted! This right here is my finest work. Sorcerer was only allowed to create one spell at a time. More than one would be obnoxiously broken. Thank heavens nobody figured out how to break that, right? Nah, of course I did. Using a very specific set of rules, you can create 2 spells instead of 1. giving Quan 2 separate armor spells, more chip damage. Wait, more chip damage? Yeah, more damage, look at that! The way this worked was that the spells were active for about 10 seconds, and for some reason, the trigger that recognized the final hex was broken. Here's how you do it. Create the final hex. Wait for it to disappear. While it's gone, you must create either an armor or meter spell. Another hex will simply disappear because, as I said, the trigger was broken. While it's gone and you've made another spell, keep the length of the original hex spell in mind. When the 10 seconds have passed of the spell being gone, you will now be able to create the hex once more, completely bypassing the fact that another spell was already active at the time. From here, you can simply continue to juggle. Once 2 spells are on the screen, you can create any order of any spell you like. And here's where things get really, really broken. Creating 2 chip spells will inflict basically quad chip damage instead of double. That in itself was crazy, but in theory a little bit hard to set up in a real match. Here's the bonus. The moment 2 chip spells have been created, Quan Chi by himself will gain permanent increased chip without any spells needed. That's mad, isn't it? But it doesn't end there. From here, create any hex on any hit that you would on any other chip setup, and you're dead! Look at that! So, in conclusion, Sorcerer was a mean dude, and nowhere near this type of character in modern times. His chip was changed, frame data was changed, and all of this would be removed eventually. He was just out of action for a few months while NRS fixed the bugs behind the scenes. This has been a substantial video to create, hence the lack of uploads recently. I wanted this to exist because many of you may not have been around back then, and this history lesson would have hopefully blown your minds. MKX was a different beast entirely back in the day, and boy, things are different now. Thank you for sticking with me in this latest installment of the Science of MKX, and take care as I see you in our next video. Bye bye.